The Final Fantasy anthology series began in 1987 with the release of the original game for NES. Since then, Square has been responsible for both the development and publishing of the series. Each entry in the series reworks the core RPG elements to create something unique and refreshing, with each game offering an original story, music, and characters. The franchise has made an immeasurable contribution to the RPG industry as a whole. Some of the series' most notable titles have significantly advanced the genre and set new standards for storytelling, graphics, and gameplay mechanics. In this comprehensive list, we will feature every Final Fantasy game ever released, including both the main series and spin-offs. It can be challenging to keep track of all the available games, but this list aims to provide a solution. In light of the recent announcement of Final Fantasy XVI, we will be examining all previous entries in the Final Fantasy series in chronological order. It's important to note that each game has its own unique world, protagonist, and storyline. This list will not include remasters, but will include remakes as they offer distinct gameplay and story experiences. Be warned, this video will be extensive, as it aims to serve as a comprehensive source of information on every Final Fantasy game ever made. More than just providing information, this video will serve as a tribute to the lasting impact and influence of the Final Fantasy series on the history of gaming. If you like more videos like this, then smash the like button below and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Final Fantasy I. Debuted on the NES in 1987. The game has undergone various remakes, including a 2021 Steam remaster with updated audio, graphics, and remodeled 2D characters. The story follows the Light Warriors, who must restore light to the four elemental fiends' darkened crystals to save the world. The party explores and levels up through randomized turn-based combat. Though not originally intended as a series, the game's success spawned the Final Fantasy franchise, making it one of the most influential games of all time. Final Fantasy II. Final Fantasy II was released on the Japanese-only NES version, the Family Computer, in 1988. It wasn't released outside of Japan until later, and was rebranded as Final Fantasy IV in the USA and Europe. A remastered version of the game is available on Steam as part of the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster series. The story follows four young orphans who lost their parents in a war with the Palamecia Empire and join a rebellion against it. It introduced the series staple, Chocobos, and Easter egg character, Cid, and changed the leveling system from XP-based to activity-based progression, where characters evolve based on the skills they use and acquire. Upon its initial release, Final Fantasy II received minimal coverage from non-Japanese reviewers, although its remakes have since received positive reviews. Final Fantasy Legend. Released for the Game Boy in December 1989, making it the first game in the Saga series and the initial role-playing video game for the system. The game was translated into English by Square for global distribution and given a new name, connected to the Final Fantasy series to enhance marketing. It was also released on the Nintendo Switch globally in 2020, followed by Android, iOS, and Microsoft Windows ports in 2021. The Final Fantasy Legend uses a turn-based system similar to Final Fantasy II. Characters in the game combat monsters and fiends using a variety of weapons, armor, and skills that develop based on the player's actions. It centers around the story of four heroes who endeavor to scale a tower located at the world center, which supposedly leads to paradise. The four heroes can belong to one of three distinct character classes, each with its unique customization path. With 1.37 million units shipped, it became Square's first million seller. Although the game received mixed reviews initially, it has since been recognized as one of the Game Boy's most exceptional games and cited as a source of inspiration for franchises such as Pokémon. Final Fantasy III. Final Fantasy III, also released on the Family Computer in 1990. The Job Change system debuted in the third entry of the Final Fantasy series, marking it as the first numbered game in the franchise to feature this element. The game's narrative focuses on four orphaned youths who are drawn to a crystal of light. The crystal bestows some of its power upon them and commands them to embark on a mission to restore equilibrium to the world. Although they do not fully understand the crystal's directives, the four acknowledge the significance of its words and notify their adoptive families of their quest. They then set out to explore and bring harmony to the world. As part of the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster series, an updated edition of Final Fantasy III, based on the Famicom version, was released in 2021 on Android, iOS, and Steam. This marks the first instance of the original version of Final Fantasy III being launched outside of Japan. Final Fantasy Legend II, the second entry in the Saga series. The game's storyline trails the protagonist on their quest to locate their father, who has given them one of the 77 magical Magi stones. The player travels through the worlds linked by the Pillar of Sky to accomplish this. During gameplay, the players engage in turn-based battles and exploration, with character attributes randomly increasing after winning battles. Upon its initial launch, Final Fantasy Legend II was met with widespread acclaim globally, with many hailing it as an improvement over the first game in the Saga series. Final Fantasy Adventure. Final Fantasy Adventure is the first game in the Mana series, originally released in 1991 for the Game Boy and later re-released by Sunsoft in 1998 for North America. Its gameplay is similar to The Legend of Zelda with RPG elements, and the story follows the hero and heroine as they attempt to stop the Dark Lord of Glaive and his assistant from destroying the Tree of Mana. The game was well received at the time of its release and has been praised as one of the best action-adventure games on the Game Boy. It also spawned the Mana series, which became a successful RPG franchise, with its sequel, Secret of Mana, released in 1993. Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV debuted as Final Fantasy II for Western audiences on the SNES in 1991. It has been ported to other consoles, with enhanced remakes and a 3D remake for the Nintendo DS, and is available on Steam as part of the Remaster series. The story follows Dark Knight Cecil on a quest to defeat Sorcerer Galbez, who is seizing powerful crystals to destroy the world. He is joined by a group of memorable allies in his journey. Final Fantasy IV introduced the active time battle system, a timer that urges players to choose a movement before the enemy attacks, and set classes for each character, a staple in other Final Fantasy games. In retrospect, Final Fantasy IV is frequently recognized as one of the most exceptional video games ever made, credited with pioneering several console RPG features that are now widely adopted. These include the idea of using dramatic storytelling in an RPG. It has appeared on several compilations of the best games of all time. Final Fantasy Legend III, the third and last entry in the Saga series for the Game Boy. The storyline follows a band of warriors as they engage in battle against a deity-like entity across various time periods. Players must traverse the different eras, participating in turn-based battles and increasing character strength by earning experience points, leveling up skills, and adopting material-based character classes. Akitoshi Kawazu, the creator of the series, did not participate in the initial production of the game as he was occupied with romancing Saga. After its release, Legend III received acclaim from both Japanese and Western critics, with particular commendation for its graphics and storyline. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, also known as Mystic Quest Legend in Europe and Final Fantasy USA Mystic Quest, is a spin-off of the franchise. It was released in 1992 for the SNES. Mystic Quest follows a youth named Benjamin on his quest to save the world by reclaiming stolen crystals to restore balance. The game features a top-down perspective and unique map navigation, as well as dungeon-style battles and conditional turn-based combat, rather than random encounters. Upon its initial release, the game received mixed reviews and sales in North America and Japan, with critics citing its simplified gameplay and insufficient depth in the storyline. Subsequently, the game has maintained a reputation for being a beginner's Final Fantasy, and is now praised for its exceptional music. Final Fantasy V. Released on the Japanese-only SNES version, the Super Famicom in 1992. FF5 has been ported to various consoles such as PlayStation, Game Boy, and is available on Steam. The game follows Bartz, a wanderer researcher investigating a fallen meteor, where he discovers the 4 crystals that control the elements and also sealing an evil sorcerer, X-Death. Bartz and his party must prevent the sorcerer from resurging in the world. Final Fantasy V introduced player customization through an expanded job system and is the first Final Fantasy to have a direct sequel, in the form of the 1994 anime series, Final Fantasy, Legend of the Crystals. Final Fantasy VI debuted on the SNES in 1992 in Japan and was rebranded as Final Fantasy III for Western audiences. It is directed by Yoshinori Kitase and is the first game in the series not directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi. The plot revolves around a group of 14 playable characters residing in a world undergoing an industrial revolution. The central theme is a rebellion against a military dictatorship, portraying a mature, dark, and violent tone. Compared to its predecessors, the game boasts remarkable upgrades in graphics, setting, and soundtrack. Due to these impressive features, the game has earned a place on numerous greatest of all times games lists, marking it as a watershed moment in the retro RPG genre. Final Fantasy VII. Still my personal favorite out of all Final Fantasy titles. Released on the PlayStation on 1997, the game follows Cloud Strife, a mercenary who joins Avalanche, an eco-terrorist group trying to stop a megacorporation from using the planet's life force as energy and pursue the corporation's former member, Sephiroth, to save the world. Final Fantasy VII achieved remarkable commercial success, selling over 14.1 million copies worldwide. It received universal acclaim and is widely considered a groundbreaking title, regarded as one of the most exceptional and influential video games of all time. It earned several Game of the Year awards and boosted the popularity of console role-playing games worldwide, while also contributing to the sales of PlayStation. Critics lauded its graphics, gameplay, music, and story, although its original English localization faced criticism. Final Fantasy VII's success resulted in enhanced versions on various platforms, a multimedia offshoot known as the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, and an ongoing multi-part high-definition Final Fantasy VII Remake, with the initial installment released in 2020. Final Fantasy Tactics. Released in 1997 in Japan and 1998 in North America for the PlayStation. Final Fantasy Tactics is set in the fictional land of Ivalice and follows the story of Ramza Beolf, a noble who becomes embroiled in a political conflict between warring factions. The gameplay features a turn-based battle system where players move characters on a grid-like map and perform actions such as attacking, casting spells, and using special abilities. It features a job system that allows players to customize their characters' abilities by selecting from a variety of classes such as Knight, Mage, and Thief. Players can also recruit and train additional characters to join their party. The storyline is often praised for its mature themes, complex characters, and political intrigue. The game also features a number of side quests and hidden characters, adding to its replay value. Chocobo's Dungeon 2. Chocobo's Dungeon 2 is a PlayStation game released in 1998. Players control Chocobo, who navigates randomly generated levels of dungeons with a partner character, encountering various monsters along the way. The dungeons are different each time, but the same monsters will appear. The game is isometric 2D with occasional 3D cutscenes. Combat is turn-based with the ability to attack in any of 8 directions. Chocobo can equip various weapons and armors, and can also assume the form of creatures from the game using morph tonic or traps. After completing the game, a new mode unlocks where players can revisit dungeons with one of Chocobo's partners, including a secret dungeon with 30 levels. Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy VIII debuted on PlayStation in 1999, building on the visual changes introduced in the 7th entry such as 3D graphics and pre-rendered sets. It is also the first game in the series to have a vocal piece as part of the OST. Other changes include the dismissal of magic points for spellcasting and realistic proportions for characters. The story follows Squall Leonhardt, leader of a mercenary group, as they are in conflict with sorceress Ultimecia, but the main focus of the game is on Squall and his struggles with his roles as leader, companion, friend, and lover. Final Fantasy VIII was well received by critics. The game was a commercial success. Personally, I think the soundtrack of Final Fantasy VIII is so good and it's one of the best that's ever been created. Final Fantasy IX. Debuted on PlayStation in 2000, Final Fantasy IX is considered one of the best games of all time. It features Easter eggs to the rest of the series and introduces new features such as active time event cutscenes, also known as quick time events, and a complex skill system. FF9 is set in a medieval-inspired world, similar to the earlier games, and takes inspiration from the first Final Fantasy title. It follows the story of Zidane Tribal, a thief who finds himself caught up in a plot to take down the malevolent ruler of Alexandria, Queen Braun, who seeks to seize the world's crystals. When Final Fantasy IX was launched, it garnered high critical praise and achieved commercial success. A PS1 classic version of the game was made available on the PlayStation Store in 2010, and it was compatible with PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable. PlayStation Vita support was added in 2012. Final Fantasy X. The first Final Fantasy game to be released on the PlayStation 2, and has received HD remasters on multiple platforms. Final Fantasy X is set in Spira, a fantasy world resembling South Pacific countries. Players control Tidus, the leader of a group of adventurers trying to defeat the monster Sin. Tidus comes from another world but discovers a close relationship between himself, Spira, his father, and Sin. The game introduces several new gameplay elements, including a shared sphere grid for all characters, which allows for class overlap as characters progress through it. Final Fantasy X was a triumph both critically and commercially. It is widely regarded as one of the greatest video games ever made. Final Fantasy X-2, which was released on March 13, 2003, was a direct sequel to Final Fantasy X, making it the first game in the series to have a direct sequel. Final Fantasy XI Online. Developed by Square Enix, is an MMORPG that debuted in 2002 for PlayStation 2 and Windows. It was the first MMORPG to offer cross-platform play. Players take on the role of a warrior of the crystal in the fantasy world of Vana'diel, completing quests to progress the story, which centers on defeating the Shadow Lord, a powerful entity commanding a legion of demons. In 2015, Final Fantasy XI's final main scenario called Rhapsodies of Vana'diel was released, and it became the last active server on PlayStation 2's online service. On March 31, 2016, support for PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360 versions was discontinued, leaving only the PC platform playable. A mobile client for the game was in development but was cancelled in late 2020. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is a 2003 tactical role-playing game for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. It shares several traits with Final Fantasy Tactics but is not a direct sequel. Players assemble a clan of characters and control their actions on grid-like battlefields, deciding their classes, abilities, and statistics. The story centers on 4 children transported to the realm of Ivalice from their hometown, and follows Marque's attempts to return to the real world while facing opposition. Final Fantasy X-2. Final Fantasy X-2 is a direct sequel to the popular game Final Fantasy X and was released in 2003. It takes place 2 years after the events of Final Fantasy X and follows the story of Yuna, Riku, and newcomer Pain, who embark on a quest to find a way to defeat a new enemy threatening the world of Spira. The gameplay features a unique job system that allows players to change the abilities and appearance of the 3 main characters. It also features a new battle system that focuses on fast-paced action, with battles taking place in real time instead of the traditional turn-based format of the previous game. In 2013, the game was remastered in high definition for the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita, along with Final Fantasy X, as the Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD remaster. Subsequently, the Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD remaster was made available for the PlayStation 4 in 2015, Microsoft Windows in 2016, and the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch in 2019. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. The first game in the Chronicles series is a spin-off of the popular Final Fantasy franchise, and it marked the return of the series to a Nintendo console for the first time since Final Fantasy VI. This installment brings new gameplay mechanics that were not present in previous Final Fantasy titles, such as real-time fighting and GameCube Game Boy Advance compatibility. Additionally, the game incorporates elements from previous games, allowing players to execute actions using commands, including attacks and magic spells. While the gameplay is reminiscent of Square's hack-and-slash game Dawn of Mana, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles offers a unique experience that combines action and RPG elements. Players can use commands to execute attacks on enemies, adding depth to the gameplay. Before Crisis, Final Fantasy VII. Before Crisis is an action role-playing video game developed by Square Enix for mobile phones. It was released in Japan in 2004 and is a prequel to the popular game Final Fantasy VII. It is set 6 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII and follows the story of the Turks, a group of elite operatives working for the Shinra Electric Power Company. The player controls a new recruit to the Turks and embarks on a variety of missions that involve espionage, combat, and exploration. Although Western critics had positive reviews of the game, it was not released outside of Japan due to issues with mobile device capacity. It was ultimately shut down in 2018 and is now considered lost media since no archived version of the game is available. However, its story will be included in the upcoming mobile game Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, set to be released in 2023. Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. Dirge of Cerberus is a third-person shooter in the Final Fantasy franchise and part of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII meta-series. Developed and published by Square Enix in 2006 for the PlayStation 2, the game takes place 3 years after the original game and follows one of the playable characters, Vincent Valentine. Vincent is targeted by Deep Ground, a mysterious organization attempting to resurrect the deadly creature Omega. During the development of the game, the staff encountered numerous difficulties, and producer Yoshinori Kitase found it to be a challenging experience, especially since it was the first shooter game in the Final Fantasy series. To cater to traditional fans of the primary series, the team included role-playing elements to make the game more enjoyable. When Dirge of Cerberus was released outside Japan, some aspects of the gameplay were altered to increase its appeal. Despite its mixed critical reception, it has its fair share of fans. Final Fantasy XII. Released in the PlayStation 2 in 2006. FF12 introduced several new features such as an open world, a fluid battle system, a controllable camera, and more. One notable feature is the Gambit system, which allows players to control the character's AI during battle, and the license system, which determines character abilities and equipment. FF12 also includes side quests, revolving around hunting optional bosses in the open world. The setting is Ivalice, a fictional land where the Arcadia and Rosaria empires are in an endless war. Players take on the role of Vaughn, an orphan street thief, and Ash, leader of a resistance movement against the Arcadian Empire after they conquer the smaller kingdom of Dalmasca. The Final Fantasy XII International Zodiac Job System, an extended version of the game, was launched exclusively in Japan for the PlayStation 2. Later, a high-definition remastered version of the International Zodiac Job System, known as the Zodiac Age, was made available worldwide. It was first released for PlayStation 4 in July 2017, followed by Windows in February 2018 and Nintendo Switch and Xbox One in April 2019. Final Fantasy Fables, Chocobo Tales. Chocobo Tales is a game that mixes role-playing video game, exploration, and card battles. Players explore a 3D environment to find picture books that transport them into pop-up picture books for minigames. Other Final Fantasy characters take up roles within the stories. It features online multiplayer capabilities where players can compete in pop-up duels or mini-games through local wireless or Nintendo Wi-Fi. Apart from original compositions, music from the titles in the series is also utilized in the game. The primary adventure of Chocobo Tales is interwoven with several mini-games. The game received favorable reviews from critics, who praised its lightheartedness and unique approach. Final Fantasy XII, Revenant Wings. Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings is a Nintendo DS game that is a direct sequel to the PlayStation 2 game Final Fantasy XII. It was released in 2007 and features real-time strategy gameplay with elements of role-playing games. In Revenant Wings, the player controls a group of characters led by the main protagonist, Vaughn. It takes place in the same world as Final Fantasy XII, but the story focuses on new adventures and challenges. The gameplay involves using various characters and creatures to fight battles and complete missions, with an emphasis on strategy and tactical planning. Revenant Wings was the first game announced in the Ivalice Alliance series of video games. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Ring of Fates. Ring of Fates is the prequel to the original game and was released on the Nintendo DS. The game takes advantage of the handheld features, such as the lower touchscreen, local wireless, and Wi-Fi capabilities. The storyline follows the adventures of twin siblings, Yuri and Kalinka, and revealing more details would spoil the story for players. The combat system in Ring of Fates is in real time, eliminating the traditional turn-based system. Players explore a 3D world from an overhead third-person camera and navigate through levels filled with enemies. The game's touchscreen adds many exciting features, such as combining the DS face buttons and D-pad for faster combination attacks. By using different combinations of buttons, players can execute a variety of unique attacks, adding depth to the gameplay. Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII. Released in 2007 for the PlayStation Portable. It is a prequel to the original Final Fantasy VII and is part of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII meta-series. In the game, players control Zack Fair, who is tasked with finding the missing soldier, Genesis Rhapsodos. During his search, Zack uncovers the origins of Genesis and Project G and how they relate to Sephiroth and Angeal Hewley, two high-ranking soldiers. While players do not control Cloud Strife in this game, Crisis Core was well received by both critics and fans. Many praising its storyline, combat system, and overall presentation. It offers an exciting and emotional journey through the backstory of one of the most popular games in the Final Fantasy franchise. It has been remastered and released on December 13, 2022 called Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Additionally, its storyline will be adapted for the mobile game Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Final Fantasy Tactic, A2, Grimoire of the Rift. Grimoire of the Rift was released in 2007 for the Nintendo DS and is the sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. It takes place in the world of Ivalice and follows the story of Luzu Clemens, a young boy who finds himself transported to a magical realm. The gameplay features a turn-based battle system where players move characters on a grid-like map and perform actions such as attacking, casting spells, and using special abilities.
I've been after this jewel for a long time, and
Final Fantasy Fables, Chocobo's Dungeon. Final Fantasy Fables Chocobo's Dungeon is a Wii RPG that follows Chocobo on a quest to save a town lost in time from eternal forgetfulness. It is a loose sequel to Chocobo's Dungeon 2 on the PlayStation. It involves turn-based battles in randomly generated dungeons with new elements such as a job system that changes the dungeon layouts, and mini-games like Bat Shooter and Kick Darts. The game can be played with the Wii Remote or Classic controller and features Wi-Fi compatibility for multiplayer battles. Sid and Chocobo search for the timeless power gem and end up in Lostime, a town on Memoria Island. The town's Bell of Oblivion causes memory loss. Chocobo, Shiroma, and Raffaello recover the residents' memories, leading to the discovery of the calamity that caused the town's disappearance. Crystal Defenders. Crystal Defenders is a tower defense game series set in the world of Ivalice, utilizing design elements from Final Fantasy Tactics A2, Grimoire of the Rift. The games feature characters with Final Fantasy-inspired classes defending against waves of monsters. The first game, Crystal Guardians, was released in 2008 for Japanese mobile phones, and later adapted for iOS as Crystal Defenders. A sequel, Crystal Defenders Vanguard Storm, was released in 2009 for iOS. The games have received graphical improvements and re-releases, including Crystal Defenders Plus in 2013 set in the Ivalice world and using design elements from Final Fantasy Tactics A2. The games feature characters with Final Fantasy-based classes defending crystals against waves of enemies. Final Fantasy IV, The After Years. Final Fantasy for the After Years was published for multiple platforms including iOS, Android, Wii, and PSP. It was released in 2008 in Japan and later in North America in 2009. The game takes place 17 years after the events of Final Fantasy IV and follows the story of the original game's characters, as well as their children and other new characters. The gameplay features a traditional turn-based battle system, similar to the original game, with players able to customize their party's abilities by selecting from a variety of classes. It also features a tale system, allowing players to experience the story from different characters' perspectives, with each tale focusing on a different set of characters. Additionally, the game includes a new band ability system that allows players to perform powerful combined attacks with multiple party members. Dissidia Final Fantasy. Dissidia Final Fantasy was released in 2008 in Japan and 2009 in North America for the PlayStation Portable. It features a roster of characters from across the Final Fantasy franchise, allowing players to battle as their favorite heroes and villains. The gameplay features a unique fighting system that incorporates both RPG and fighting game mechanics, with players able to level up their characters and unlock new abilities as they progress through the game. The game also includes a story mode where players can experience a new storyline featuring characters from across the Final Fantasy series. Additionally, Dissidia includes a variety of multiplayer modes, allowing players to battle against each other or team up to complete missions. Dissidia emerged from the Kingdom Hearts director Tetsuya Nomura's aspiration to craft a spin-off for the franchise. However, he later modified the concept to be associated with the Final Fantasy series. Dissidia was well received commercially and critically. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Echoes of Time. It was released in 2009 for the Nintendo Wii and DS and is the third installment in the Crystal Chronicles series. Echoes of Time features a single-player mode, as well as a multiplayer mode that allows up to 4 players to team up and complete missions together. The gameplay involves exploring a fantasy world filled with monsters and treasure, battling enemies, and solving puzzles. It also features a unique system that allows players to switch between the Wii and DS versions of the game, allowing them to continue their progress on either console. The game also allows players to customize their character's appearance and abilities, adding an extra layer of depth to the gameplay. Final Fantasy, The Four Heroes of Light. Debuted in 2009 for the Nintendo DS that features classic turn-based gameplay with a colorful and charming art style. Players follow the story of 4 young heroes on a quest to rescue a princess and save the world from a terrible curse. The gameplay features a turn-based battle system where players can choose their actions from a menu, with the option to stack abilities and spells for stronger attacks. Additionally, the game incorporates a crown system that allows players to change their character's appearance and unlock new abilities as they progress through the game. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, The Crystal Bearers. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles The Crystal Bearers is the last game in the Crystal Chronicles series, featuring a more realistic and darker atmosphere than previous games in the series. Set 1,000 years after the original game, it takes place in the same world as Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. The game was well received in Japan, praised for its well-written story and characters, but criticized for its map system. Western reviewers were more mixed, noting that it is less of a traditional RPG and more of an action-adventure game. Final Fantasy XIII. Follow the story of Lightning, a former soldier who finds herself embroiled in a conflict between the human and godlike Fal'Cie. The gameplay features a linear progression through a series of interconnected areas, with battles taking place in a turn-based battle system that emphasizes fast-paced action. The game also features a unique character progression system called the Crystarium, where players can level up their characters and unlock new abilities and spells. Additionally, the game includes a paradigm system that allows players to switch between different combat roles on the fly, giving them greater flexibility in battle. Final Fantasy XIII serves as the flagship title in the Fabula Nova Crystallis collection of Final Fantasy games, and it is also the first game to utilize Square Enix's Crystal Tools engine. While Final Fantasy XIII received critical acclaim in Japan, it garnered predominantly positive reviews from Western video game publications, with particular commendation for the game's graphics, presentation, and battle system. However, the game's linearity received a more mixed response from some critics. Final Fantasy Dimensions. Final Fantasy Dimensions is an iOS and Android game released in 2010. It utilizes 2D graphics and features a job change system resembling that of Final Fantasy V. The game also has a battle system that is a variation of the Final Fantasy series' active time battle system. The game follows two parties, the Warriors of Light and the Warriors of Darkness, in their quest to reform their shattered world and thwart the dark plans of the Avalon Empire. Final Fantasy Dimensions II, a sequel, was released in 2015. Final Fantasy XIV Online. Final Fantasy XIV Online takes place in the world of Eorzea and allows players to create their own customizable characters and embark on quests and missions. The gameplay features a traditional MMORPG style with a range of classes, abilities, and skills to master. It also includes a crafting system that allows players to create and customize their own weapons, armor, and other items. The story is divided into multiple storylines known as expansions, with each expansion introducing new areas, characters, and story elements. The game also features a variety of multiplayer modes, including dungeons, raids, and player versus player battles. At launch, Final Fantasy XIV encountered severe criticism, leading to an official apology and the replacement of its development team. In October 2011, Square Enix declared that the game would undergo a relaunch as Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, with an entirely new version reconstructed from scratch. Dissidia 012 Final Fantasy. Dissidia 012 Final Fantasy is a fighting game in the Final Fantasy series, released in 2011 for the PlayStation Portable. The game serves as a prequel and remake of Dissidia Final Fantasy, revealing events that occurred before the previous game's story. It features the 12th war between gods Chaos and Cosmos, who summon warriors from parallel worlds to fight for them. It was well received, with critics praising the game's improvements to gameplay and entertainment features. The gameplay in Dissidia Final Fantasy involves one-on-one battles on a battle map, where players can use bravery and HP attacks. Bravery points are equal to the damage dealt by an HP attack, so players must perform bravery attacks to steal points from their opponent and increase the power of their HP attack. Square's staff initiated the game's development with the objective of enhancing the gameplay from the first game to offer players more engaging characteristics and balance specific areas. Dissidia 012 garnered positive reception, with various publications lauding it as one of the best games on the PSP. Final Fantasy Type 0. Final Fantasy Type 0 is a critically acclaimed entry in the Final Fantasy franchise that was initially only released in Japan in 2011 for the PSP. A spin-off from the main series and part of the Fabula Nova Crystallis subseries, it follows Class 0, a group of 14 students from the Dominion of Rub-Rum who must fight the neighboring Mili Tessie Empire after they launch an assault on the Crystal States of Orience. Note that the story is known to be one of the most emotional in the series, so be prepared for some tears. The game earned acclaim for its storyline and gameplay, but it also faced criticism for its camera control and artificial intelligence. Other games related to Type 0 have been produced, including a high-definition remaster that was launched worldwide in March 2015. Final Fantasy XIII-2. Released in 2011 and is a direct sequel to the original Final Fantasy XIII. The game takes place 3 years after the events of the first game and follows the story of Sarah Farron, Lightning's sister, and her companion Noelle Price as they travel through time to prevent a future catastrophe. The gameplay features a similar turn-based battle system to the first game, with players able to switch between different combat roles on the fly. This sequel features a time travel mechanic that allows players to explore multiple eras and change the course of history by altering events in the past. Additionally, the game includes a monster recruitment system, allowing players to recruit and train monsters to fight alongside them in battle. Final Fantasy XIII-2 was widely acclaimed in Japan and garnered generally favorable reviews from Western video game journalists. The game's gameplay, lack of linearity, and graphics were applauded. However, the storyline received criticism for being convoluted and weak. Theatrythm Final Fantasy. Theatrythm Final Fantasy is a rhythm video game where players control 4 Final Fantasy characters, and select a game to play from Final Fantasy I to Final Fantasy XIII. It features 3 stages: field, battle, and event, each with different mechanics. Players level up their characters after completing a stage, with adjustable difficulty settings. The gameplay involves tapping the screen to the beat of the music, with players unlocking music and movie scenes. It has 3 stage styles: field music, battle music, and event music. The game's plot involves the gods Chaos and Cosmos and the crystal that controls music. Chaos disrupts the crystal, and increasing rhythmia is the only way to restore it. Characters from the Final Fantasy universe come together to harness the power of rhythmia. Final Fantasy All the Bravest. Final Fantasy All the Bravest is a mobile game developed by Bitgroove and published by Square Enix. It incorporates elements from various Final Fantasy games, and gameplay involves unlocking character jobs by defeating enemies and bosses. Players can have up to 40 characters in their party. The game received negative feedback due to a lack of depth, character customization, story, and costly in-app purchases. Some positive aspects were the humor and nostalgia from the original games. One of the producers acknowledged that All the Bravest was an app and not a game, and the confusion may have led to player disappointment. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. This is a reboot of the original Final Fantasy XIV online game that had negative reception due to various issues, including gameplay mechanics, server issues, and lack of content. It boasts an improved storyline, combat system, user interface, content, graphics, and server stability. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn is a vast improvement over the original game, with a more polished and enjoyable gameplay experience. The changes made to the game have resulted in a more immersive and engaging MMORPG experience for fans of the series. Lighting Returns, Final Fantasy XIII. Released in 2013 and is the 3rd and final installment in the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. Lighting Returns takes place 500 years after the events of the second game and follows Lightning, who is tasked with saving the world from destruction within 13 days. The gameplay features an interesting time management mechanic, where players must balance completing quests and advancing the story while managing the time remaining. It also includes a customizable combat system, allowing players to customize their abilities and weapons to suit their playstyle. Additionally, the game features a variety of costumes and outfits that not only change Lightning's appearance but also provide unique abilities and attributes. The development team aimed to provide a definitive conclusion to the narrative of both Lightning and the XIII universe, and to address critiques aimed at the previous 2 games. But in the end, the game still received mixed reviews, with the primary commendation directed towards the game's battle system. The reception towards the graphics, time limit, and other gameplay features was more mixed, while the story and characters were criticized for being inadequately developed or weak. Theatrythm Final Fantasy: Curtain Call. Curtain Call is the 2nd installment in the Rhythm game series and a sequel to the 2012 title Theatrythm Final Fantasy. It features comparable gameplay to its predecessor and was released for Nintendo 3DS. It is a rhythm video game that allows players to use characters from the Final Fantasy series to navigate through songs in rhythm games. The game includes 3 different gameplay modes: field stages, battle songs, and event stages. It has 221 songs from various Final Fantasy entries, including fresh and new songs from different titles. There are 60 playable characters available, and the game includes a new versus mode for multiplayer. The game also features a fat Chocobo that appears randomly during field stages and grants the player various pieces of loot. Final Fantasy Agito. Final Fantasy Agito was released in Japan in 2014 and later in North America and Europe in 2015 for mobile devices. It takes place in the world of Orience, and follows the story of a group of students at a magical academy, who must band together to fight against the invading Mealy Tessie Empire. The gameplay features a turn-based battle system with a card-based combat mechanic, where players must strategically select cards to perform actions such as attacking, casting spells, and using special abilities. In August 2015, it was announced that the game would be replaced by a new version due to technical issues. The planned versions for the PlayStation Vita and Windows devices were scrapped, and the proposed localization was also cancelled. Its successor, an online multiplayer game called Final Fantasy Awakening, was launched in 2016. Final Fantasy Record Keeper. Final Fantasy Record Keeper is a free-to-play mobile gacha game for iOS and Android. It features original characters and stories combined with characters, scenarios, and battles from other games in the Final Fantasy series. It was released in Japan on September 24, 2014, and worldwide on March 26, 2015. The gameplay consists of active time battles with 2D sprite graphics. Final Fantasy Record Keeper garnered positive reviews overall. Critics lauded the game's utilization of nostalgia for previous Final Fantasy games and enjoyable combat and customization. Nevertheless, the game's absence of character interaction and superficial story drew criticism, making it challenging for the game to sustain players' engagement. The game has over 10 million downloads worldwide and was available in multiple languages, but all languages except English were removed in 2020. In June 2022, it was announced that the global version of the game will end service on September 29, 2022. Final Fantasy Explorers. A Nintendo 3DS title, Final Fantasy Explorers is an action RPG with single-player and multiplayer modes. The player collects scattered crystals and engages in fights with classic Final Fantasy enemies and summons. The game follows a quest-driven structure and offers manually adjustable quest difficulty. Explorers has 4 character slots available, with 3 ally slots for human players or defeated monsters. Players start as a freelancer and can choose from early Final Fantasy jobs or title-exclusive jobs. Over 500 pieces of equipment can be created from materials found on the field or won in combat. Multiplayer mode allows up to 4 players using Nintendo Network or conventional Wi-Fi. Final Fantasy Dimensions 2. Developed for iOS and Android, Final Fantasy Dimensions 2 is the sequel to the first game released on 2010. It focuses on Moro and Emo, who embark on a journey through time to prevent the destruction of their world. The gameplay features a turn-based battle system, where players can switch between characters and use their unique abilities to defeat enemies. The story is divided into chapters, with each chapter taking place in a different time period. The game also includes side quests and hidden areas to discover, adding to the game's replayability. It was renamed Final Fantasy Legends 2 in Japan on November 2, 2016. The original free-to-play version was shut down on October 31, 2017, and was replaced by a paid version with the same name in Japan. Mobius Final Fantasy. Mobius Final Fantasy is an episodic RPG created and published by Square Enix for iOS, Android, and Windows. Players control the Warrior of Light, who wakes up with amnesia in the world of Palamecia and is tasked with helping its inhabitants defeat dark forces. The game features gameplay elements from previous Final Fantasy titles, including leveling, exploration, and turn-based combat tied to a job system. Common themes from the original Final Fantasy game, such as Warriors of Light and the fight against chaos and darkness, are also present in the game. Mobius Final Fantasy was a mobile game that gained significant popularity, registering over 2 million players within the first few weeks of release. It was considered one of the most successful mobile titles released by Square Enix in 2015, with over 3 million downloads in Japan by the end of that year. On January 15, 2020, Square Enix announced that the game's service would end on March 31, 2020 in Japan, and June 30, 2020 worldwide. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is a free-to-play RPG for iOS, Android, and Amazon Fire devices. It's a spin-off of the Final Fantasy series and the first collaborative effort between Square Enix and Allum. Brave Exvius is a turn-based RPG that blends elements from the Final Fantasy series with those of the previous Allum game, Brave Frontier. The game's battle system is similar to Brave Frontier and features a simple interface that allows players to command their characters to attack by tapping their corresponding attack button. Swiping the button and selecting the desired command allows players to use special attacks or items. Rain, a knight from the kingdom of Grandshelt, and his friend Laswell meet Fina, a young woman trapped in a crystal who needs their help. They soon discover that Veritas of the Dark, a member of the Sworn Six of Palladia, is attacking the Earth Crystal in order to destroy all crystals and end the world. Together with Fina, Rain and Laswell set out to stop Veritas and save the crystals. The game earned average reviews from critics, but it contributed to Square Enix's financial success in 2015, along with other mobile titles the company developed. World of Final Fantasy. World of Final Fantasy is a turn-based game released in 2016 for multiple consoles. You play as the siblings Lon and Rain, who set out on a journey to explore the world of Grimoire and recover their lost memories. The game features a unique chibi art style, with characters and creatures resembling smaller, cuter versions of their Final Fantasy counterparts. It features a return to the traditional battle system of classic Final Fantasy games, utilizing the active time battle system and introducing a stacking mechanic, where allied characters and monsters are stacked to affect stats and turn numbers. It received predominantly positive reviews, with numerous commendations directed towards its aesthetics and stacking mechanism. However, the game's leisurely pace and storyline received criticism. Final Fantasy XV. Final Fantasy XV, at the time of the posting of this video, is the latest entry in the mainline series, debuted in 2016 for PS4 and Xbox and is now available for Windows. It features an open-world, action-based combat system with quick weapon swapping and elemental magic, a vehicle to travel and camping. DLCs have been released to include additional gameplay elements such as multiplayer option. The game is set in Eos, where the Niflheim Empire dominates much of the land and have stolen a powerful crystal from the Lucian royal family. Players take on the role of the Lucian throne heir, traveling the world to restore the crystal to its rightful place. In addition to the game, Square Enix developed a multimedia venture named the Final Fantasy XV Universe, which encompasses a few spin-off games, an anime series, and a feature film. Critics warmly received Final Fantasy XV, with extensive acclaim directed towards its gameplay, visuals, and soundtrack. However, the response to its story and presentation was mixed.
Nice work, Gladio!
Final Fantasy Awakening. Final Fantasy Awakening was initially released in China by Perfect World in December 2016 and later released in other languages, including English over the following 2 years by other publishers. The game takes place in the universe of Final Fantasy Type 0, where players take on the role of a cadet in the Dominion of Rub-Rum as the four nations of Orient engage in war. All gameplay is multiplayer exclusive, featuring both cooperative and player versus player modes. It was overseen by staff from Square Enix and developed by Perfect World. Final Fantasy Awakening was a commercial success with 2 million downloads within its month of Chinese release and received positive reviews from game journalists. However, the English version closed in 2019 due to service changes, and all other versions shut down in May 2020 with the end of the licensing deal. Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. Dissidia Final Fantasy NT has a redesigned battle system featuring 4 combat classes: vanguards, assassins, marksmen, and specialists. Set long after the first 2 Dissidia games, World B is restored for a conflict between Materia and Spiritus, who summon warriors from both Cosmos and Chaos.
What's it look like?
The summoned warriors retain their memories of both the previous war and their original worlds to expand World B, and the energy from their battles maintains it. Its combat system focuses on 3-on-3 battles, with players controlling one character while the AI controls the other 2. It features 2 types of battles: standard battles, and core battles. Although it was well received in Japan, it received mixed reviews outside of it. Dissidia Final Fantasy NT was acclaimed for its innovative 3-on-3 combat system and fan service. However, it faced backlash for its user interface, online matchmaking, and lack of content. Final Fantasy XV, Pocket Edition. Final Fantasy XV, Pocket Edition is a streamlined mobile remake of Final Fantasy XV, preserving the original storyline and adjusting the gameplay for mobile platforms. It is divided into 10 chapters, with the first chapter being free and the remaining 9 available for purchase. Players control protagonist Noctis Lucas Selim and explore the world of Eos with his companions, completing objectives and progressing through the story campaign. It features an overhead perspective with simplified controls, including a leveling system that unlocks new moves and abilities for characters through ability points gained by resting at camps. This mobile rendition of Final Fantasy XV garnered generally favorable reviews. Some critics dubbed it an outstanding summary of the original game, lauding its ability to enable players to delve into the story without the substantial time commitment. War of the Visions, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. A tactical role-playing game for iOS and Android devices. It's a spin-off of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, inspired by the Final Fantasy Tactics series. War of the Visions, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is a tactical role-playing game featuring gameplay elements similar to Final Fantasy Tactics and the Alchemist Code. It includes grid-based maps and turn-based combat, as well as the Esper summoning system. The game also features free-to-play gacha systems for acquiring new characters and in-app microtransactions. Each character has a level progression system and abilities that can be unlocked. War of the Visions takes place on the continent of Ardra on the world of Lapis, depicting a war among 5 rival nations in the distant past, waged using the power of visions. The continent of Ardra is also referenced in Brave Exvius, but is currently inaccessible and obscured by clouds. In a span of 10 days post-release, the Japanese version of the game was downloaded more than 3 million times. The game received commendation for its single-player plot and voice acting performances, but also garnered critique for its level of complexity and balancing issues during player-versus-player matches. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a 2020 action role-playing game. It is the first in a trilogy of games remaking the 1997 PlayStation game Final Fantasy VII. The gameplay combines real-time action with strategic and role-playing elements, and the story follows the mercenary Cloud Strife as he joins an eco-terrorist group to stop the powerful megacorporation Shinra from using the planet's life essence as an energy source. The game features real-time exploration and battle mechanics, with an altered active time battle system that gradually fills up or can fill faster with attacks. Players can assign special abilities to shortcut buttons and switch between party members during battle. Strategic elements such as selecting weapons and magic for each character still remain. The game received positive reviews for its graphics, gameplay, narrative, and music, and became one of the fastest-selling PlayStation 4 games. Critics also praised its faithfulness to the original game. Final Fantasy, The First Soldier. FF7 The First Soldier is a free-to-play battle royale game for Android and iOS, released on 2021. It's a spin-off of the original Final Fantasy VII, set 30 years before its events, and takes place in the world of Midgar. Players take on the role of soldier candidates in a battle for survival simulation. However, the game's servers were shut down in January 2023 due to a failure to deliver their intended experience. Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is an action role-playing game published by Square Enix in celebration of the Final Fantasy series' 35th anniversary. The game follows a group of characters who are transported to a fantasy world to confront the evil chaos, and is set in an alternate universe prequel to the original Final Fantasy game on NES. Stranger of Paradise is a dark fantasy interpretation of the original Final Fantasy game setting, featuring the protagonist Jack and his companions, including Ash and Jed. They journey to destroy chaos, facing a knight who has taken on the role of chaos, and questioning their own roles as the foretold warriors of light. Combat occurs in real time, and Jack can utilize both physical and magical attacks. It has received mixed reviews from critics. Final Fantasy XVI. An upcoming action RPG developed and published by Square Enix. It is the 16th installment in the Final Fantasy series and will be released on June 22, 2023. The game features segmented open environments, melee and magic-based combat, and recurring series features like chocobos and summons. Set on Valisthea, a world divided into 6 nations that hold power through magical crystals and dominance, the game follows protagonist Clive Rosefield on a quest for revenge against the Dark Icon Ifrit, amidst a malady known as the Blight. Final Fantasy VII, Ever Crisis. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is a mobile RPG for Android and iOS, set to have a worldwide release and a closed beta in summer 2023. It is a free-to-play mobile game that retells events from the 1997 video game Final Fantasy VII and other titles in the compilation of Final Fantasy VII media franchise. The game will be released in monthly episodic installments, and players can freely select chapters from a timeline to jump between different entries in the series. The battle system is based on the original game's active time battle system. However, the game will offer loot boxes containing random selections of weapons and costumes. Phew! We finally reached the end. This is the longest video I've did so far. I hope you found it helpful or entertaining. If you just jumped directly at the end to find out what Final Fantasy game is my favorite, well, it's always gonna be Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, I know, I'm boring. Anyways, how about you? Let me know what Final Fantasy game is your favorite. Don't worry, I won't judge you if you pick a mobile game. If you want to look for other great JRPGs that does not have any Final Fantasy attached to the title, then make sure to subscribe because I'll be posting more of them soon. You can also watch some of the Ultimate List videos I've already uploaded. See you in the next one.